Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman, and today got a real treat for you. Her name is KT Stowers, and she is a principal engineer with Hazen and Sawyer. And she's also AZ Water Association Young Professionals Committee Chair. KT, say what's up to everybody.
Hi, everyone.
All right, KT. So you're a principal engineer at Hazen and Sawyer. Let's kind of go into what you do with Hazen and Sawyer, what a principal engineer is. Not everybody knows, you'd be surprised. So walk us through what a principal engineer is, and then tell us what a normal Tuesday is like for you.
All right, yeah. So Hazen to kind of serve as the middleman between the utility and the contractor for designing projects. We'll do construction management, a little bit of all of that. At Hazen, I'm a principal engineer. It's just basically someone who's kind of about to be a project manager, who's not like a new grad. So you're kind of like a mid-level person. And my day-to-day consulting world changes all the time. No day is the same. Some projects have deadlines sooner than others. Typical Tuesday, first thing I do is I wake up in the morning, drink some coffee, and look at LinkedIn until I wake up. Watch a lot of your videos. Yeah, and then I start like making a to-do list. I'm very A-type. Make a list of like, okay, this is all the things I need to get done for the week, and then I just kind of prioritize it. Sometimes my days are I'm writing reports, I'm reviewing reports. Maybe I'm doing a hydraulics model. I do some biowind process modeling. Sometimes I'm researching different technologies for alternative evaluations. Sometimes I'm coordinating with vendors, trying to get equipment. And then I'm also like overseeing staff that is helping me with designs or report writing as well, making sure that they have everything that they need, making sure that they're making progress. If they have any questions, I'm there for them. So it's a pretty busy day, but I really like it. And I like how everything's changing and every day is just a new thing.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. Whenever there's like a week or 2 weeks where I'm like, I just did the same thing this week that I did last week. It's like, okay, what am I doing wrong here? So I'm glad it's different day to day for you. So let's talk about your path to becoming a principal engineer. You're here now, you're doing your deal, you're in it. Like it's probably fun. And it's probably some parts that are like, oh, stressful. So let's talk about what it took to get to this point. Like, were you interested in wastewater when you're 14 years old?
Yeah, so I've always known I wanted to be in the environment world, I guess. I actually have like this drawing that I did in kindergarten where they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And people were like, doctors, a singer, an artist. And I had environmental scientist in kindergarten. And my mom still has that paper. I wish I had it with me right now to show you. But I gotta see it. I guess I just always knew I wanted to do something for the environment. My mom grew up in the 60s and 70s. She was very hippish. She always made sure like the environment was very important to us growing up. And then I was just one of those people that like inherently understood math and science growing up. It came easy to me. So my mom would put me in like math camps and STEM camps and engineering camps during the summer. And then that's when I learned about environmental engineering. So I was like, oh my God, it's like the two things that I love, like math and science, you know, from the engineering aspect and also the environment. And that's what I decided to study when I went to college.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was in college, I did some internships, and that's where I got introduced into the wastewater industry. I did some internships first at it's called the National or North American Development Bank. They actually provide loans and subsidies for funding projects along the US and Mexico border. So that was my first internship that kind of got me into the wastewater industry. So they would fund like treatment plants, but they also funded like solar energy, anything kind of environmental that was infrastructure. From there, I was like, man, I really like the wastewater aspect of it. And then I got plugged into a consulting firm the next year, there. I just fell in love with it. I was like, this is what I wanted to do. So in college, I kind of like just kept specializing in wastewater classes. And my senior year, I did the student design competition, which is actually a competition that we host in Arizona as well. And the YP committee is responsible for that. And that's where we got paired up with a mentor from a consulting firm that I ended up working at as my first job.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like answer this, because I see those competitions pretty much every conference I go to. And so you were in one and you won it. So what advice would you give to somebody in college to like, hey, if you really take this thing serious, this could line you up for your next position? Like, what advice would you give?
Definitely like find a mentor. I know my college, I was lucky. They did find the mentors for us to pair up with. But if your college doesn't set you up with a mentor in the industry that's like working in the industry and can give you that industry knowledge, because a professor can only give you so much, you know. Some professors do have industry backgrounds, but some of them are not having that background, and you need someone that's in the industry to give you that background. Because the competition prompt is usually like a wastewater treatment plant expansion, or you're adding BNR, or you're doing something with a wastewater treatment plant. And if your professor doesn't have that experience, you need a mentor to know, like, okay, how do you size a clarifier? How do you do hydraulics? What do I need to know process-wise? Another thing is presentation. Our PowerPoint had so many of those animations but it was very like smooth. You would talk and push the button as you were talking and pushing the button, the animation would correlate with what you were saying. And I think that just gave a really good pizzazz to the presentation to keep people engaged, you know, because it's kind of hard to make talking about like, oh yeah, we added a clarifier of this dimension and this flow because XYZ kind of sexy, you know? So making that like animation aspect of it really helps. It's like giving your presentation in a way that you're telling a story. Don't just be like, oh, this number and this number and this value is why I did that. You're telling a story of how you got to that answer. So that's what I would recommend for people wanting to win this competition, because not only do we win at Texas level, we also won at Left Tech nationally. We competed against 13 other schools. So that definitely set us apart from the other schools.
I'm sure. And there's nothing like winning, because it begets usually more winning, which is pretty cool. So you graduate from college. Did you have a job lined up right away, like having graduated college, or did you get the diploma, you hit your parents' couch, and you're like, okay, now what? Start job searching. And then how'd you end up in Arizona?
Yeah, so I did get a job right away because our mentor was for the student design competition was the place I ended up working at. It's called CP&Y. They got acquired. They're now a different kind of firm, but back then it was called CP&Y. And I worked like immediately, like 2 weeks after college, I got into my job and started working.
Wow.
Yeah, and my very first task, I remember they brought me on and they said, do you know what a cooling tower is? And I said, well, I did work, one of my internships in high school was at a power plant. And so I kind of understood what it was, or, The Simpsons, they always start and they show a cooling tower. That's that cooling tower shape in the beginning of The Simpsons that he's working at. And I was like, that's all I know. And they said, that's great. You're going to design one and no one else really knows too much about it. Here you go. And that was a challenge. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't really have anyone to ask questions about. How do I solve this problem? So I ended up doing lots of research on cooling towers. They're obviously used for power plants, for cooling the water that goes through the coal plants and even nuclear plants. But how do you apply that to drinking water? And I did find a couple of articles, and the ADQ equivalent in Texas is called TCEQ. It's the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality. And they actually had some regulations on cooling towers, which I was really surprised for drinking water applications. So that kind of helped me too. So I just found all this research, and then I just started doing cold calls to vendors that supplied cooling towers asking, hey, have you done this before? is this something that you're interested in doing? Because it's going to have some complexity. And I had a lot of, vendors are always very excited for new things, new projects, new sectors that they could enter into. So I had a lot of excitement back. They would talk to me, really explain how those cooling towers are designed, the different options, all that. And I said, okay, that's great, but we have these environmental standards that we have to keep to. How do you feel about that? Because sometimes when you're making modifications to people's equipment, they get kind of sensitive about it. And some of them kind of dropped off after that, and some of them stuck with me. And those people that stuck with me, we had to go over some hurdles. So, for example, there's like this fill material. It's called fill material that goes inside the cooling tower to help take water droplets and make it as small as possible, make it as flat as possible, so that when the air comes in, it's cooling that water droplet very efficiently. And then the water gathers in a basin on the bottom, and that's how you cool the water. It's all atmospheric cooling. And then the steam goes off on the top of the stack. That fill material, because this was a drinking water application, had to get NSF 61 approved, and they have never done that before. So I was like, these fill material looks very similar to clarifier settlers, tube settlers that you normally see in clarifiers, both at water treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants. And I know those are NSF 61 approved. So we worked with a clarifier tube settler manufacturer to get fill material specially made for the cooling tower that was NSF 61 approved. And that was just a really cool process. Like, I really learned a lot about cooling towers, obviously. I really learned how to get over these regulatory kind of like red tape a little bit. Like I learned a lot through that. I ended up giving a presentation after I was finished designing this cooling tower at a Texas water conference. And yeah, that was my very first project when I came out of college, and I just learned so much from it.
Like, what would you say to the people who, I'm sure everybody in life, we've been presented with something that's like way out of our scope of like competence, and we're like, I don't want to take it on because I'm fearful of being bad at it and like looking like the guy or girl who's done something bad or who can't get the job done in the right way. So what do you say to the people that are intimidated, scared of a project similar to that? I mean, you could have said, you know what, I'm not really that prepared. Can I just work on some lower level stuff first? But you did it. You took it on, and now you're better for it. So what do you say to the people who are kind of shy away from stuff like that?
I say, be humble. Obviously, you're not going to know everything, especially when you come out of college. People know that. You could just call a vendor and say, just be honest. Say, hey, I just graduated college. This is the first task they gave me. I'm trying to find more information on this. Have you heard of this before? Can you walk me through this process? How do you design these things? Like, just being humble and asking questions and letting them know where you're at helps that communication barrier. Because if you just call them and say like, oh yeah, I'm a consultant at X, Y, and Z, and I need information on this, they don't know what level to gauge that conversation with you. They might think, oh, she's an engineer, I have to be very technical and high level. And then you're having a conversation where they're up here and you're down here, and you're not understanding the context in between. And that might lead to a bad design, right? So you want to let them know, okay, I'm at this level, talk to me at this level, ask questions. More than likely, they're there to help. They want to sell you a product, at least like with the vendors and manufacturers. Even like working with clients on the other way around, right? I always tell a client, okay, this is my history. This is how many years I've had in the industry. I want you to walk me through your plant, walk me through your plant and tell me, how are you operating this? I love talking to operators and getting their input. I'm just like an extra communicator, and I will ask all the questions, and I let people know, like, hey, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. Are you okay with that? Or how much time do you have to answer questions? That way I could also gauge how many questions I should ask, because I can't ask over and over and over. But yeah, just being open and upfront and honest and humble. Don't go into any conversations with ego, because it's going to turn people off, and you're not going to get the information that you're trying to search for.
Sure. What was like the most, I guess, fun of a project? Was it this one that you ever worked on in your career, or is it something you're working on now, or like what's the coolest thing you worked on?
I mean, I'm working on some really cool projects right now, but that first project with the cooling tower was, I call it my baby project because I had started from conception to final completion where it was constructed. We cut the ribbon, we turned it on, and it turned on. Like, that is a huge career achievement, I feel, because everything in this industry takes a long time. I was lucky that a project of this size, I was able to see it through the whole way. So this project is called the Vista Ridge project. It was for Texas when I worked there, but it was originally going to serve water from College Station area in Texas, and it was going to bring the water 150 miles to San Antonio, Texas. So that's a very long pipeline. It ranged from 54-inch to 60-inch. It was steel bar wrapped concrete pipe. It consisted of 3 like intermediate pump stations. They're pumping at 44 MGD each. It had the cooling tower at the head of the distribution because we had 18 well sites and the well water was coming out at 124 degrees Fahrenheit. So we wanted to cool the water because you don't want to turn on your water and it's boiling hot. And because we were entering this water into the distribution system in San Antonio, we wanted to make sure that the water quality met their water quality. And also, like, higher temperatures means that you're going to feed more chemicals and it has a higher chance of having like biological bacteria growth. So we wanted to cool the water, and that was the point of the cooling tower, which was very unique in itself. This cooling tower was the size of like a football field and a half, and it was 40 feet tall. It was like a 4-story tall cooling tower. It was huge, just for drinking water.
Wow. So, answer this dumb question. Is not all well water is hot when it comes out of the ground, especially that hot. So why is it? Is it?
Oh, no, not all well water is that hot. No,
Okay.
that was a unique case. It was just where that aquifer was located. It was just a very hot aquifer.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. So the cooling tower is your most favorite project you worked on. So fast forward to today. Do you just work on one project like a year or to completion, or do you have like 18 different projects you're spinning in place? And how does that work?
Yeah, as a consultant, you're working on multiple different projects for multiple different clients, which I enjoy. I like that. It's very fun. And I like that too, because you always have like projects at different phases, like maybe one project's at pre-design, or maybe they're different kinds of projects. Like I have one project that's a planning project, one project's a design project, another project's like an asset management project. And they all have different needs and different deliverables. So I'm working on, different projects like that throughout the year.
Gotcha. What would you say is a skill set that you would tell a youngster to pick up to be good at what you're doing today, to succeed at it?
Yeah, I think just being adaptable, being open to just constantly learning. Like I love to learn. I wish if I could like make money being a full-time student, I would just be a student at university my whole life because I just love learning new things. And you're learning every day. No, it doesn't matter where you are in your career. You could be even like a 30, 40-year person in this industry. You are still learning new things every day. Technology is constantly changing. The way we evaluate things is constantly changing. Regulations are changing. I mean, we're finding new emerging contaminants in our water, and we're trying to figure out how to treat that. You know, it's always evolving in this industry. So you have to be able to adapt and be open to accepting and learning things constantly.
What would you say in learning that that's kind of it's one of those things that of course we do it through osmosis or by happenstance, but what do you do that's intentional to learn? Like, are you going to seminars, you picking up books on these topics? Like, what do you do that proactively helps you learn more?
Yeah, I learned better by kind of teaching others and explaining it to others. So I will like go to lectures, I'll look at stuff online, I'll read stuff, but I try to go to someone else and explain it and see if they understand what I'm saying or see what questions they have. Because maybe there's a question I didn't even think about, or maybe I thought I was explaining it very well. And then they're like, I don't get it still. And how can I change it? And the more you repeat it and trying to explain it to someone else, it really like sticks in your head. And that's how I learn.
Sure, I like that. Learning by teaching is probably the best way with me also. When you explain your position to like family, friends, what do they normally get wrong about thinking that what you do? Like if you're out, let's say you're out at dinner, somebody asks you, so KT, what do you do for work? Like what do you know what do you do? Like what's usually your go-to explanation that will help somebody who knows nothing about what you do know what you do?
Yeah, actually, I have a tagline I developed, and it's on my LinkedIn. But my tagline is "I make dirty water drinkable." And even though they don't
I
really
like
understand everything that goes into that, they can understand what that means. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But I have actually a funny story. So my brother's an architect, and he designs like apartment complexes. So one time we went to go see my brother's apartment complex that he was designing, and we walked through. It was like before the complex was open, and he's showing us everything. And then we go outside, and there's a puddle on the ground in the parking lot. And my family's like, "Go over there and take a picture. That's what you do." And I was like, I laugh because I was like, oh my gosh, like, you think people understand what you're doing, especially your family that you're talking about your job often. And yet they're like, look, you're the puddle over there. And it's true. It's a lot of what we do is underground. You don't see what we do. I can't take my family to a plant as easily. You can, but not as easily to show them this is what I do versus my brother who's an architect, and you see an apartment complex every day.
Where do you think your engineering field will be in 50 years? Like, let's say somebody's sitting in your chair right now and they're 50 years from now, what problems are they solving for? Like, what are they doing? Like, will AI have impact? Will, this driverless electrified everything, will it have an impact? What will the landscape look like 50 years from now?
That's a big question. It's hard to think of the future. I mean, just think about, when I was young, we had landlines, we had dial-up internet, and now look at what we have, and that's not even 50 years. That's less than 20. So I think in the future that 50 years, like just to be crazy, let's say like people have their own, like, how they decentralized power grids? Or at least in Texas, they decentralize it. I know Arizona is more centralized, but I think you'll have like decentralized treatment plants. Like your house will have its own individual treatment instead of these giant treatment plants. Because I'm thinking like population is going to be big, land space is going to be really needed. So maybe you have your own, I don't know, rain capture on top of your house. Maybe you have your own self-reuse treatment system at your home. I mean, direct polymer reuse is really big right now. And that's something that maybe we'll start using that water that you use at your home, and you're going to reuse it for anything else at your home. So like, I think that's like a big, crazy one, but I like to be really creative when I think about the future and where we're going. I still think our job, like as engineers in this industry, is still going to be needed. AI is really interesting right now and how advanced it is, but in this industry, a lot of it's based on experience, and nothing is like really truly theoretical. You have like, you go to school and you learn, okay, BOD is this, TSS is this is how you design a plant based on these typical average numbers. And then you go into the real world, you go to these plants, and they're not running and operating in ideal conditions. They're running in their own way. And that's, the operators learn that. They're intuitive to it. They change their systems to react to their system. And the AI, I don't know if it's advanced enough like that. You need that human aspect to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think we'll ever get to a point where I guess that wisdom, that 25 years of experience will become democratized? Like, there has to be a way in order for the industry to move forward, or any industry to move forward, to where the guy who's been in the industry for 35 years can easily train the guy who's been in the industry for 2 years, or the girl who just graduates college will know enough to navigate, the next 15, 20 years of her career by being able to look at a book or a website or whatever to figure out exactly what to do. You think we'll ever get there? or are we just so far away from it now?
I mean, we already have this kind of struggle. So our industry, over 70% is close to retirement. So we
70.
have, yeah. And so we have a huge gap in this industry. I think it's like probably from the '08 recession. So you have people that are like 40 plus years old, and then you have people that are kind of 30 and under in this industry. We're missing like the 30 to 40 age. There's not too many of them. They're kind of unicorns in this industry. And so you have these super senior folks trying to explain very complicated concepts and like years of experience to these new people, because we need to fill the gap. We're doing this right now. I saw this in Texas. I see it here in Arizona. I know it's nationwide. I heard from other people in other states. This is a problem everywhere. And it's hard, right? It's hard to remember when you're been in the industry for a long time, like what did I not know when I was new to this industry? Like where do I find information? Luckily, like the internet and Google and like all these resources that we have now, like WEF has open access, water, textbooks you can refer to, like everything's on the computer and it's easy to access. But navigating all that information still needs people to kind of help you get through it. And like you gotta like at least design something once before you're like, okay, I feel good about it, you know, and you need someone to walk you through that first design. So yeah, we're already kind of dealing with that issue of trying to have that transfer of knowledge to these new hires and these people that are trying to become these new mid-levels in a world that there's not that many mid-levels. So
Yeah. How has it been adjusting from Texas to Arizona? Different, same, you know, water's water, dirt's dirt. Like how has it been with the adjustment there?
Oh yeah, it's very different. Texas, I mean, we had 300 MGD plants that we were designing to, and Texas doesn't have a land issue. There's so much open land. The city owns a lot of land. So like conventional activated sludge all the time. You're not doing too many new technologies. Texas also is kind of getting into reuse, but it's not as delved into it as it is here in Arizona. So I didn't really do too many reuse projects in Texas. Once I came to Arizona, everything, all the wastewater treatment plants are basically reuse plants. And every plant out here is trying to treat as best as possible. So you have more like MBR, membrane plants. You have more tertiary treatment, so disinfection, more filters, because they're trying to make it reuse quality for the wastewater treatment plants. So it is very different in that aspect. Also, like the plants here are a lot smaller. I mean, most of the plants I work are 20 MGD or below. I haven't worked on anything larger than that. But in Texas, like I said, I was working on like 300 MGD or 200 MGD. So it's smaller scale. You have different treatment, like for the drinking water here, you have more arsenic in your water. You have higher TDS in your water, where Texas has a lot of aquifer water and it's very clean. So you don't have too many additional treatments that you need there. So yeah, there's been some differences, but like I said, I love to learn. I've learned all these new things now that I could just add to my resume, and it's been a great time learning all these new things. Now I could say, oh yeah, I've designed arsenic treatment. I've designed an MPR now. Like I get these things.
Yeah. Let's say all your bills are paid. You don't need to work for the money. Where outside of North America would you want to be a engineer?
It's a good one. I've always wanted to live in Europe. You know, it's a different kind of lifestyle out there. Everything's like a 1 to 2 hour flight away. I think it'd be really cool. And that's so hard. I mean, I think Barcelona would be really cool. Milan. Yeah.
Okay.
I think like, I mean, even Paris, when I went to Paris once, they have like a sewer tour, and it's just like the infrastructure that you're probably dealing with abroad is so much more ancient and older than you deal with the US. I bet they have some really cool intricacies that they have to deal with over there in this industry.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. you're part of AZ Water. What's your auspice there? And then what's, I guess, if you had to tell somebody the value in joining an association like AZ Water, what would that be?
Oh yeah. So like when I moved from Texas to here, in Texas, I was in an association like AZ Water. There was the North Central Texas Association of American Waterworks. But I started there. So like my first year, consulting firms kind of encouraged consultants to get into these associations and organizations. So my company was like, hey, you should come with us to this luncheon. So I went to one of the luncheons that they had, like a technical luncheon. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's like literally all the water, wastewater people that we know in one place. Yeah. And they have all these committees. So they didn't have any openings in their committees. And I was like, I want to really be involved. Can I get involved? And I was like, hey, I realized y'all don't have a social media, because I was trying to find you on Instagram or Twitter to see more about y'all, but all y'all have is a website, which is good, but like I need more connection. Like, do you need a social media manager? And they said, oh yeah, we'll do that. We'll take that. So then I kind of like made a position for myself, and I started managing their social media. And then from there, they're like, oh, you really like this stuff. You should join our communications committee, and you should help run our newsletter. So I took their newsletter, which was like done in like some old Word application that's not very user friendly.
Yeah. Right.
I forgot what it was called. Also, like the background was blue and the text was black, and I was like, this is hard to read. So I was like, let's modernize this. Let's put it on something that, like, because all the articles are written by different people. Let's just put it somewhere where someone can take ownership of their articles, and then we just read one final through and make sure it looks good. So I moved it to MailChimp, which is where anyone could go in there and edit their articles. You could put the templates in there, and it made the process so much quicker. Like it used to take a month to write the newsletter, and we were writing the newsletter in a week because people just had to get their stuff in, and you just do a quick review and make sure it looks good.
Beautiful.
And then from there, they're like, hey, our young professionals have an opening. Do you want to be a chair of the young professionals? So I kind of worked myself up into that organization in Texas. When I left, I was the chair there. And then when I moved to Arizona during COVID, which was a weird time, like not a lot of these organizations kind of died a little bit. There wasn't that much involvement. There was only so many like online happy hours you could do that people were kind of burnt out about it at the end.
Yeah.
So when I moved here, I was like, if I want to meet people and network and get connections right away, I need to join whatever the Texas equivalent was of that organization. So that's how I found Arizona Water Association. So I joined the YP committee just as a general member. I was sitting in on the meetings and stuff. And then they're like, hey, we have an opening for vice chair. It's an elected position. Anyone could run for it. So I ran for it, got elected, and now I'm chair after a year and a half. But I mean, even just like, I think the value of these organizations, I value it very much. It really does get your name out there. When I went to AZ Water Conference last year in 2022, I didn't know a single person. I went to the conference, I was running the YP raffle booth, but I didn't really know anyone besides the people I worked with. And then this year to the 2023 AZ Water Conference, I was constantly having my name yelled or people tapping me or like, oh, hey, KT. Like it was nice to go into a conference of that size and have a lot of people that I recognize now, or they recognize me all because of my association with the AZ Water Association. So there is a lot of value to that.
Yeah, that's huge. Just showing up. I mean, I've been in so many of those situations where you just don't know anybody in there. Nobody knows you, but the second, third time around, you're kind of like, you feel at home. And that's kind of, I mean, it makes it more, it makes your career a little bit more, I guess, greased. It makes you navigate the career a little bit better when you can make those connections. So I always say, man, just show up. If there's something in your city or your town that gets everybody of a like mind together, just go. You'll meet people like, they're there for the same reason. They don't know anybody either. So it's a good reason.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it is always hard going to your first meeting where you don't know anybody and you're like, what if I have no one to sit next to? Or like, what if I was, I don't know, thrown into like something that I don't feel comfortable with? Like just show up. It's a lot of times you're not the only person that is the first time that you're going to that meeting. A lot of times they're going to have introductions in the beginning. You're going to end up talking to the person next to you. Like, it's going to be organic and it's going to be comfortable by the end of that meeting. You just got to show up, and it just really makes a difference when you're showing up, because then people start recognizing you, and it's nice. And like, people, I mean, even as like chair and vice chair, people saw my work ethic through those positions. So now when they are my clients that I work with, they already know how I operate. They already know how to communicate to me. There's like that barrier of like cold calling the client is not there, because they already know me and we could just talk like normal people. There's not like this front that we're putting up, you know? So it helps so much.
Yeah. Let's talk mentors. How would you say, let's say you're young coming in the industry, and you know that you'll need, using mentors is, for me, it's kind of a skip, because you have X amount of knowledge and they have Y amount of knowledge. But if you can grab some of their knowledge, you can skip a good amount of the knowledge you will learn just by, going through day-to-day life. So what would you say is the best practice to find mentors? And then also on the giving end, what's a best practice to mentor somebody else coming into the industry?
Yeah, so a lot of the mentors I've had, well, my very first mentor, once I was in the working world, kind of came organically. It was someone I was working with. He saw my like passion, my optimism for the industry, and I guess he was like, man, I really just want to work with her. And we were never on a project together. So he ended up being more like a mentor to me, because he just wanted to get to know me better and like help me in any way. I mean, he was also involved in those organizations in Texas, and he helped me get involved in there too. And he also, like, there was a time where I was like, should I get my MBA? Like, I decided to go to graduate school and get my MBA. And he was like, oh yeah, you should totally do it. Like, he encouraged me. And it's just nice to have someone that you could just go to and have like that, connection already, that you're in the same industry, you understand where I'm coming from. Like, do you see the benefits of this, or I'm struggling with this? How did you overcome it? So I get more like mentorship for me is more like I need help with the soft skills more so than technically, because I feel like technically, no matter where you're at, you're still going to have those technical advisors. But a mentor to me is someone that kind of navigates you through all the soft things, or the things that are a little bit not as easy to explain or
yeah. But could you explain, or not could you, but could you go into like what those soft skills are? Because when I think of soft skills, I think of like a mentor would kick me in the butt and say, dude, go to these events, join an association, go to these conferences. And another mentor would tell me like, hey man, whatever business cards you get, just thank them for meeting you. And then, send up an email and say, hey, we should grab coffee, like little things like that. So what are some of the soft skills that have kind of a mentor has given you that helped you navigate?
So like one time, like when you're new in this industry and there is that generational gap, and you just don't really understand like that communication barrier. I feel like sometimes, I think everyone that's new has a communication barrier, because you haven't learned your way of communicating it, and how to communicate to others that maybe aren't similar to you. So like my mentor helped me a lot, say like, hey, like the older generations were taught that the supervisees have to adapt to the supervisor. So like you just got to adapt to them. But now the newer generations, they teach you, oh, the supervisor should adapt to the supervisee. Okay, so there's like these two houses of like management, and you have to figure out, okay, which one is whoever the superior is, which house are they in? And then that's how you kind of gauge your communication, and that just like, even just pointing that out, I was like, oh my God, mind blown. Like that explains so much. Like maybe I need to quit being so not like selfish, but like maybe I shouldn't think that they have to adapt to me. Maybe I do need to adapt to them. Like we got to meet people halfway. Even in like relationships, you have to compromise. You can't just be so stubborn, put your foot down, and like they have to listen to me. They have to do it my way, because they're also doing the same thing. So you got to come to the middle and be like, how are we going to communicate? How are we going to get this done? And that was like a huge help when I was first starting off, that my mentor helped guide me.
That's good. Also good advice for marriage and and parenting also. So, thanks for that. All right, KT, this has been great. A question that I always like to ask is the burger question. So wherever you're at in the Valley of Arizona, where can I go to get the best burger? Where are you going to send me?
So I'm a little strange. I didn't really grow up eating burgers. I'm not a huge burger fan.
But
I
you
know
say
that's weird.
y'all, so okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like barbecue. I liked pulled pork sandwiches. Chicken sandwiches, but burgers wasn't a big thing of mine.
Okay.
But I have been to a couple. I live kind of like near Arcadia area, and there's this place called The Stand, and they have like just 3 burgers, really easy. And you just choose one of the burgers, and each one has been really good. They also have really good milkshakes.
Okay. I like it. Burger and milkshake, can't beat that. All right, KT, this has been great. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thanks for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge with us. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. KT, any final words before we get out of here?
I just want to say thank you for asking me to be on this podcast. And I want to thank, my mentors that I had growing up and getting me to where I am today. So like Dario Sanchez, thank you. Tamara Dipner, thank you. Randall West, thank you. And then also like Daniela Panful, she was the chair at the YP committee. She really helped me get connected into this industry when I first got here. So thank you, Daniela. And just anyone that's out there that they don't know how to get plugged into the wastewater industry. They don't know how to make connections. They need help networking. Maybe you're shy, you're a quieter person. Just reach out to me. I love making connections for people. If you could just tell me a little bit about yourself, I'm like, oh, you're just like so-and-so. Oh, you should join this committee. Like, just reach out. Even if you're not a young professional, you could come to a young professional committee meeting and learn so much about what's going on in AZ Water in general and what's going on in this industry. So yeah, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, it's all good. All right, well, KT, thanks for hopping on the show. This has been the Public Works Podcast, and thanks for tuning in.